Brooke Newman, and this is my audience. Okay, now I'm sure all of us here have a grandparent, a loved one, relative, or friend who's elderly or maybe disabled, and we all, don't want any harm to ever come to them, right? I mean, but just for a second, imagine that loved one is being physically abused by their son or daughter, or financially exploited by their power of attorney, or worse yet, they are defecating and urinating all over their floor because they can't physically get themselves to their bathroom any longer. Hopefully a situation like this would never happen to your loved one. However, these situations happen every day, and it's in scenarios like these where Adult Protective Services needs to be involved and we can really help. By the early 80s, most states had some type of protective services for the elderly. In fact, in the Journal of Elder Abuse and Neglect, Mixon states that some states were more proactive in these services. So by 1981, almost all the states in one way or another noted that they had an office with responsibility to provide protective services. So today what I'd like to do is discuss how to conduct an APS investigation, starting with giving some of the background of APS, and then going into some of the policy, and then finally the steps to take to conduct an APS investigation. So first, it's important to understand the background when you're conducting an investigation. An APS started initially in 1975 with the Title 20 of the Social Security Act, which gave funds to states to offer protective services to their citizens. However, in order to get these funds, the states had to open an office within social services for children and elderly, child protective services, and adult protective services. Now that we've gone over briefly the background of APS, I'd like to go over some of the APS policy that's imperative to know before and during while you're conducting the investigation. Abuse in the Code of Virginia is defined as the willful infliction of physical pain, injury, or mental anguish or unreasonable confinement of an adult. Neglect is defined as an adult that is living under such circumstances that he is not able to provide for himself or is not being provided services necessary to maintain his physical or mental health. Exploitation is defined as the illegal use of an incapacitated adult or his resources for another's profit or advantage. So there's also two types of investigations that are laid out in the Code of Virginia. One being a community investigation, which is when the investigation is conducted in the elderly person's home. The second is a facility investigation, because unfortunately in the nursing homes and assisted living facilities, they can be even more prone to abuse and neglect in those situations. So now that we've gone over some of the policy, I'd like to talk to you about some of the actual steps that a social worker would take when conducting an APS investigation. First, when the report comes in, the social work supervisor is going to validate the report and then assign it to the appropriate worker. At that time, generally, the social worker would look to see if there had been any previous reports, and then coordinate with law enforcement if necessary. In cases of sexual abuse, law enforcement has to be present because that's a criminal offense. Then it's imperative that the social worker get a face-to-face contact with the adult that is claimed to be abused or neglected. And during that interview, you're going to be assessing for certain things. Physical functioning, can they bathe, can they dress themselves? Their physical health, what are their diagnoses? Their mental health, do they have any mental health diagnoses? Are they hallucinating while they're talking to you? How is their memory? And then lastly, if they will give it their income or other financial resources. Specifically, when it comes to financial exploitation, you need to know what their income is. After that, you're going to want to make sure you document everything, and then lastly, interview the alleged perpetrator. You don't want to do that at the beginning. You don't want any more harm to come to the adult than necessary. And all of this needs to be done within 45 days. The investigation can take place in 45 days. At the end of the 45 days, the social worker will make a disposition. Needs protective services and accepts protective services, needs protective services and refuses, unfounded, or the needs for protective services no longer exists. So I know many people get very nervous when they hear social services. They think of all the negative things that are associated with it, but hopefully today I've kind of eased some of those fears and let you know that APS is here to here to help the elderly and their loved ones in the community. And briefly today, I know very briefly we talked about the background of APS, some of the policy, and step-by-step directions of how to conduct an APS investigation. So I would just like to thank you all for joining me today, and I hope you learned something. Thanks.
Yay.